My name's Tim Kenny from Tim Kenny Surveying, and this morning I really want to talk about verbal reports. Right, this is something I've seen a little bit of, and came up actually in a conversation with another surveyor relatively recently. And this is obviously where you carry out an inspection for a home survey, generally speaking, and instead of producing a full written report, you provide a verbal only report. And it's one of those things that, on the face of it, can seem like a good idea. From the surveyor's point of view, you're cutting out time writing a report. You may feel that you're cutting out some liability because you're not putting anything down in writing. From a client's point of view, it might seem beneficial. They get immediate feedback. Maybe save some cost because, there's less time involved, so they're paying out less. And, also it can seem like a really helpful thing to do. And generally speaking, as surveyors, we want to help our clients out. If you've got a mind towards providing good customer service, getting those good reviews, getting that good feedback, it can seem like a really great idea. But it comes with what, for me, would feel like a very, very significant downside. And that is because it actually doesn't reduce liability. The way I see it, the way I would interpret it, it actually increases liability by a significant margin. The idea we go, okay, if I produce the verbal report, client's got nothing in writing. How can they prove what I said? Therefore, how can they make a claim? Right? That would be one way to look at it. But actually, the reality is, as a professional, what you say, you are as liable for as what you write down. Even if you're having a conversation with somebody in the pub and they were deemed to be in a professional context, they can rely on that. Nothing written down, no instruction, not even being paid for it. They can rely on it. So, not safe from that point of view. The other side of it is that actually, yes, they can't prove what you said, but you can't prove what you said either. So if they, I don't think many clients out there are unscrupulous, really. But if they were, they could say, well, actually, you know what? You didn't tell me about that thing, even though you did. You couldn't prove you couldn't. Or they could just merely have a misunderstanding. They may not have heard it. They may be overwhelmed looking around the house, may not really understand what you're talking about, and therefore take the wrong impression from what you've said. And therefore, not carry out works or not make adjustments to price of the property that they perhaps should have done, or find defects that they didn't really think were there. And all of a sudden, you've got a claim. And then when it comes to defending that claim, obviously, firstly, your insurers are going to be very unimpressed because there is no evidence of what you told them. But should it even get to an ombudsman or to a court, then they're going to go, you know what? Where is your evidence? Where is your contemporaneous evidence of what you told them? I.e., where is your written report? Because they will deem you, obviously, as the professional that you are. They will know that you are your expectation is that you will write it down. If you fail to write it down, then that is your failure as a professional. So ultimately, they are going to be highly minded to side with the claimant, because the claimant is just a lay person. There's not the same obligation on them to record what they were told. The obligation is on you to record what you told them. And if you haven't done that, you've almost automatically been negligent. So if you're negligent in that area, it's quite reasonable to say, well, you know what? We'll agree with the client because you, as the professional, should have written down what you told them. Obviously, the only way to protect yourself from that is to write down what you tell them, which basically means producing a report. So even if you were to give the client a verbal only, your obligation would be, as soon as you got back to your desk, is to write up exactly what you told them. Now, of course, can you remember exactly what you told them? And if you can write up exactly what you told them, effectively you're going to produce a report. Well, you're doing exactly the same work, so you might as well charge them for doing the report and send it in, and do it properly. I say it's just, to me, there's no real benefit to this verbal only. Or certainly, maybe a benefit to the client, but even then, I think it's sketchy at best, and certainly no benefit to the surveyor, even essentially a high risk. And I think actually the same applies. When you get the odd job where you turn up a property and there is some issue with it, some defect that you think is so significant that the client really should just pull out and not buy the house. Some people might interpret it as a major issue with the roof or some kind of movement or whatever it might be. You ring them up and go, you know what? This is, there's this major problem. You're probably not going to want to buy this. Do you want to save yourself a few quid and I just won't write it up and we'll just call it there. Again, that can seem sensible, but to me it has the same problem, because what if that client does go ahead with the purchase? Right? There's no written report from you as to what you told them. There's no written report from you from what other defects might be present. They could interpret your statement about, oh, there's this issue with subsidence, for example. They could interpret that as being, okay, well, there are no other issues. They may choose to go ahead with the purchase. They may negotiate on the cost to allow for the necessary works. And then they move in, they find 6, 7 other defects, which you didn't tell them about from their point of view. And they again would be entitled to make a claim. If you as the professional would have been expected to find those defects during that survey, and you didn't tell them about it, even though you said, look, don't buy this property, this has got this problem, it's got this problem, you're still there. You're still in that same situation where, you haven't written down what you said. They can quite happily say, you know what, you didn't tell me this thing. And the court or the ombudsman will almost be bound to side with them, because again, you have been negligent in not providing a written report. On top of that, of course, anytime you do that and do not provide a written report, it is not acting in compliance with the Home Survey standards that do require a written report. And of course, the reason why it requires a written report is, if we go back to the beginning, you come under massive risk if you don't do it. As I said, it's one of those things. Sounds like a really good idea. Sounds like being really helpful to clients. Going out over and above to doing the right thing to try and get that good feedback, those good reviews. But to my mind, it doesn't help the process, puts you at risk, doesn't benefit the client, and it's just a generally bad idea. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know if you think any different, if you've got a different attitude towards it. Maybe it does work for you. Maybe you think my interpretation of the process is wrong. Let me know. Always good to have those conversations. Thank you very much.